So a few years ago, I made my first feature film, Unhealthy Comedian, currently available on Amazon Prime. Now, just because I made a film doesn't mean it's perfect. And as a creative person, I am my own biggest critic. So I'm going to sit here and nitpick the hell out of my first feature film. Because why not? This quote doesn't really have anything to do with the film, but I felt like since it's a documentary, I had to open it with some kind of statistical fact thing. JD hated this joke and begged me to take it out of the film, but I liked it because most of the stand-up comedy footage we have is him at voice party shows, and so I wanted to switch it up, and this is one of the few bits I had of him that wasn't at a voice party branded show. Oh my god, I'm so sick of this song. I used it for the trailer, and I wanted to open and close the film with this song and treat it like the film's theme song. But this opening segment's like 7 minutes, and so I just had to loop this one section of the song over and over and over again. Right here where he bites into the pizza. I should have just changed it right there. I should have just switched to a different song right there. I hate how overexposed and blown out this interview with Cheeto is. We were shooting in the bright sun. I couldn't really see the screen on the camera, so I just set everything to auto and hoped for the best. What I should have done is brought a 5-in-1 reflector, bounced some of this sunlight back into his face, and then I could bring the exposure down so we don't have all these blown out highlights. But too late now. So I was actually editing this film as we went along so we could see how it was coming together, and that allowed us to kind of shape and redirect the story as we needed to. One of the things we saw early on was, boy, there's a lot of JD in here. And we had the idea too, we should really get some other voices in here, get some other perspectives. And so that's what led to us getting Cheeto Floriano and Archimedes Zabria and Christina Pickles and all these other voices in here. So that way it's not just all JD all the time. With this interview, there was a bunch of other people there too, and it kind of became just a conversation between all of us and him, which is cool because it made him like relax and open up and be more comfortable. But then his eye line is all over the place throughout this interview. So this interview with Christina is actually in Archimedes' gym. Like there's a little wall to the right of her, and on the other side of that is where he has all his equipment and those light tubes. So when we went to his gym, I was looking for interesting locations, and I was like, oh, I definitely want to use this mural because that completely stands out and that's very distinct. And then I can shoot Archimedes over here in his gym equipment. So we were making the most of this location to make it look like it wasn't just everything recorded in the same spot. We wanted to diversify it, make it look interesting. And then I shot this with just one camera just because of time restrictions. I didn't have time to bring a whole kit and set up a bunch of stuff. So throughout this interview, I'm like zooming in and zooming out. Whenever I think she's saying something that I'm not going to use, I'll zoom in or I'll zoom out and I'll reframe. And then I'll cut it together and try and make it look like I have more cameras than I really do. I hate vertical video, but sometimes you have to just work with whatever they give you. One of the things we wanted to do with this is rather than just make it JD's story, which it is, we also wanted to have a broader reach and show that he's not the only one going through this. Other people struggle with this too. Some people struggle with this aspect, some people struggle with this aspect. Everyone is fighting this same battle, and we're all struggling. I don't know why I didn't re-white balance my camera after we shot his interview. I really should have, because this is just nasty. I shot this whole thing real run and gun, guerrilla style. I have a bunch of lights, I have a bunch of cameras, I have a bunch of equipment, but loading all that up and packing all that and hiking into the woods to film interviews with all that is a pain in the ass. So I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I knew the one thing I had to nail was the audio. If you have poor audio, it completely kills your film. People will tolerate subpar visuals if the audio is good. If the audio is poor, you're done. So I knew that of all the things, I have to focus on audio and make sure my audio is good. And that's one thing. Like the visuals on this, I think are kind of lackluster. I'm not going to win any cinematography awards, but I think I did an okay job with the audio. When we first started on this project, we didn't know it was going to be a feature film. I think the idea was, it'll be like a 15, 20-minute piece on YouTube. And I think it was actually JD's idea to do it because he was like, well, I'm trying to lose weight, and if we document it, then it creates some accountability. I'll have to lose the weight. Little did he know. But we started filming, and then we put things on hold to focus on the podcast, and then the pandemic hit, and then a year had gone by and we hadn't shot anything. And so I went and I cut together a fake trailer with all the footage we had shot for the documentary so far, plus footage I had from the podcast and footage I had of JD stand-up. Basically anything I had with JD in it, I cut a fake trailer out of it, and I showed it to him like, what do you think? And it like lit this fire underneath him, and it like motivated him to get back and have us finish this film. But it also showed that like, hey, this story is bigger than just, here's a fat guy trying to lose weight. It's, here's this guy, he's a comedian, he's an entrepreneur, he's a podcaster, he's unhealthy, he wants to change his life, and it's about him and his growth and his journey. It's not just this one thing, it's all these things that he's doing, and that makes him a bit more relatable, and it makes him a bit more engaging when you see all these things he's doing, like podcasting and stand-up. You know, that's much more interesting than just, here's a fat guy trying to lose weight. The thing that always jumps out at me when I watch this is, obviously the cinematography is not great, and that's because when we shot this, we didn't know it was going to be a feature film that you can stream on Amazon. Like, we thought it was just going to be a little throwaway thing on YouTube. And so we weren't shooting it like it's going to be a movie. And a lot of this footage I'm pulling from, like the podcast, like we were still figuring things out with the podcast. There's focus issues with autofocus on the cameras. Like, a lot of this stuff wasn't meant to be a feature film, and then we cobbled it all together to make a feature film out of it. And so you can see, like, by this point, when we're interviewing Joaquin, we knew, like, oh, this is going to be a feature. And so this interview, aside from some autofocus issues, looks way better than some of the other interviews. So all this behind-the-scenes stuff at the voice party, this was actually shot with a GoPro because all my cameras were being used in the production of the voice party. So the only things I had left over was my GoPro or my cell phone. I felt the GoPro would be a little easier to vlog with. So when we resumed production and we started filming for the documentary again, originally we didn't really have an idea for the ending. The ending was just going to be, and now he's skinny. Which is this nebulous ending that may or may not come, and it could take years, it could take months, who knows. When we resumed filming, I figured out that the 5K JD agreed to run was happening a month after the Voice Party's 100th episode. And so I pitched the idea to him of, instead of this nebulous ending that may or may not happen, what if these two events are the ending and we're building to these two events as the climax of the film? The problem is, once I realized that, it was like 3 months before the 5K, so JD really didn't have that much time to lose a bunch of weight. That's my bad. JD gets a lot of flack for the ending of this film, but that's totally my bad. I wish I would have given him more of a heads up, because we started filming, we took a year off, and then we filmed for 3 more months and we're done. So all this here was actually a part of a short film comedy sketch we were filming for an event that was coming up. It was going to be called The Way Too Personal Trainer, and it was just going to be a series of comedic events that just escalate. And we never finished it. We filmed like half of it, pandemic hit, event got canceled, we never finished it. So I had all this footage lying around, and I'm like, well, I'm making a film about JD trying to lose weight. I have all this footage of JD working out with a personal trainer for this comedy sketch. So I just used it here. And it is kind of jarring. It does kind of stand out. It does kind of break up the flow, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a not good way, because it does give us a different tone and it does add something new, so it's not just the same things over and over again. But it does stand out, and that's because this was supposed to be its own self-contained comedy thing, and I shoehorned it in here. Since you hear me off camera sometimes throughout this documentary, I thought it was important to actually show people who I am, so that way I'm not just this weird disembodied voice. Normally I don't like to be on camera, but I felt in this case, I should probably shoehorn myself in. This is one of the first things we shot for the film. We shot this before the big hiatus. As a wrestling fan, if they're going to do any kind of yoga, it might as well be DDP yoga. I don't know why we didn't get yoga mats. They're just on like the hard tile floor in his bedroom. Totally should have got some yoga mats. I think this is probably the best scene in the film because we see him struggling. We see other people struggling with him. And we really see the adversity, and we see him putting in the work and asking people for help to put in the work. And that vulnerability makes us relate to him a bit better, and it makes him a more sympathetic character, a more captivating character. And there's also some great humor here. This is also probably some of the funniest stuff in the film. So JD was in a lot of pain. His body was giving him a lot of problems. He was having a lot of health issues. And so one day on my way home from work, I just called him to see how he was doing and check up on him. And I happened to have an audio recorder in the car with me, so I just hit record and recorded him through the Bluetooth in my car. And then I had this shot from an old Frosted Mini Fears episode. And so I made it seem like my conversation with JD was a voicemail he was leaving me. And I think it totally works. I have to have some kind of visual. I can't just have the audio on the screen. And so this worked in a way where it's totally believable that he would have just left me this message. Yeah, as a bigger person, he was having back issues. He was having joint issues. And we would literally be recording the podcast, and in between guests, he'd be laying down on the floor because his back would be killing him. And I wanted to show that here. I wanted to show how vulnerable he was. I wanted to show it's hard to be healthy. It's hard to lose weight. Like, if you're a bigger guy, it's harder than people think. And I really wanted to show the struggle and show everything he needs to overcome. So when he does that 5K at the end, it's a big deal because you see everything he had to overcome to get to this point. But he was in a lot of pain during this time. His body was not holding up. And again, if I knew this was going to be in a feature film, I totally would have lit it in a way where you don't see the shadow from the camera and the monopod. And then all this boxing stuff, this was shot on a Osmo Action with a little hand grip like this, because it was going to be easier to travel with and easier for me to follow him around than trying to set up something on a shoulder rig or a gimbal. It was just quick and easy to just shoot it on this thing, and I think it looks fine. Like, his gym was well lit, so it wasn't really an issue with lighting or anything. In the background, you see that like 3/4 wall, that little partitioned off wall. On the other side of that is the mural that we shot Christina's interview at. So just trying to make this location look as different as possible, trying to get as many different looks out of our space as possible. Because every time you got to load up your gear and travel to a new spot, that's time, that's energy, that's money. So we just wanted to maximize our logistics as best as possible. You know, and none of this was scripted. Like, this stuff from that sketch was obviously scripted because that was supposed to be an entirely different thing. But all this stuff here, I just told JD, actually work out. And I'll follow you around and I'll record the whole thing and we'll pick out the best bits. We'll cherry pick the parts that we think will work. But don't feel like you got to put on an act. Don't feel like you got to put on a show. Just be yourself. Just be genuine. Because that's what's going to resonate on screen. People can tell if you're not being genuine. And people won't connect to something that's not genuine. A lot of this behind the scenes stuff, I'm clearly working on getting the 100th episode set up. So I'll just hand a camera to whoever was free at the time and tell them, film whatever you like. I'll cherry pick the best bits later. It's weird looking back because 6 months ago we just had our 200th episode. So it's weird looking back at the 100th episode because at the time that seemed like a huge deal. Holy shit, 100 episodes. And now we've done 200. We're coming up on 250 episodes. And we've grown so much since then. It's interesting to look back and see how we used to do things and see how excited we were for the 100th episode, not knowing all the other milestones that still laid ahead of us. We learned so much from this 100th episode. If you watch our 200th episode, it's night and day. We had to shoot this episode a different way because we normally do a 4-camera setup with the podcast. And so there's one camera on the guest, one camera on the host, one camera on the co-host, and then we'll do like a wide shot of everything, or we'll just do a close-up on me if I'm going to chime in. With here, we were having an issue with one of our cameras, so we could really only run 3, and I made the choice, well, host and co-host will get an angle, co-host will get an angle, and then the audience will get an angle, because we really want to show, hey, we got an audience here. In hindsight, I wish I would have had a wide shot of everything, because anytime somebody stands up, they go out of the frame. The pacing's not great in this film. I had it in my head that I wanted to get as close to 90 minutes as possible. Because I was like, well, if it's like 45 minutes, that's not a real film. If it's 60 minutes, that's not a real film. So a lot of this was I wanted to pad this out to try and get up to 90 minutes. Just I was really hung up on that it has to be 90 minutes or it's not a film. And it's not. It's like 75 minutes, which is close. But a lot of this stuff was just like, well, what else can we talk about? What else can we put in here? How else can we pad this out? And so it does kind of lack some structure, and the pacing is kind of all over the place because of that. I could easily tighten this up to like a tight 45 minutes, and I think it'd be much better. But my own hangups were like, no, it's got to be 90 minutes. One of the things I wanted to get across with this, because I knew we had a unique opportunity here, is I wanted to show how much work goes into putting our podcast together. Because me and JD get there at 9. It usually takes us about 2 hours to set everything up, and then we're filming all day. We got guests at 12, 2, 4, 6. We get 4 or 5 episodes done in a day, and then we got to pack everything up. So we're usually there like 12 hours a day to produce our show, and people don't see that. They just see the finished product. So we wanted to take this opportunity to show, well, here's the part you don't see. Here's all the work that goes into making this happen, and here's the work ethic it requires to pull this off. This goddamn ending. All these beautiful drone shots are courtesy of Tony Tamayo. So props to him. I knew I wanted the ending to be a big deal. I wanted to stick the landing. And so I had asked him, like, hey, I'm going to be shooting footage at the event. You're going to be shooting footage at the event. Can we trade footage? I'll give you what I got. You give me what you got. I'll use your stuff in my movie. I'll give you my stuff, and you can use it in the video you're doing for the event in general. And he was totally down. So all these beautiful drone shots are courtesy of him. But this goddamn ending was so stressful to film. It was supposed to start at 10. I got there at like 9:20. The event had already started. I'm calling JD frantic. JD's not feeling well. He doesn't know if he wants to do the 5K anymore because he's not feeling well. And I'm just like, well, this is the end of the film. We don't do this. We don't have a movie. So I kind of like peer pressured him into showing up and doing it anyway. But I was a little mad that the event started earlier than it was supposed to. Because I had all these different things I wanted to do, and I had a rig I was going to put on JD's, like a Snorri Cam rig, and wasn't able to do any of that. And then while he's like signing up to get his number, they do Ready, Set, Go and start the race. And I was just like, I missed Ready, Set, Go? How do you miss Ready, Set, Go? That's the most important part. So JD just said, F it, and he just ran the 5K without a number. And then Joaquin, who was filming this with me, just grabbed a camera and ran. So that's why all this is so shaky, because he doesn't even have a shoulder rig. He's literally just holding it with his hand and running. And then I stayed behind so I could get him coming across the finish line. Thankfully, Tony had gotten Ready, Set, Go, and I was able to use that. But I was mad that I wasn't able to make this a bigger deal. It does kind of feel like a lackluster ending. I wanted it to be a bigger deal. I was really frustrated that things didn't work out the way I was hoping, but it does kind of peter out here. I wanted JD to bring his scale and have us do one final weigh-in after the 5K, but he couldn't find his scale, so we had to scrap that. It's fine. One of the reviews we got actually praised the ending, how like it's not this big hole, and now he's a comedian, and now he's skinny. It's like this smallest victory. It's like, I busted my ass, my body hurts, this sucks. I walked a 5K though. And it's like the smallest of victories for him, but it means so much. So I do like the ending. It's not what I had in mind. We had to pivot. I was very frustrated and pissed off at the time, but we were able to make it work. And sometimes you just have to play the hand you're dealt, and you're going to have to pivot. It's that old phrase, art from adversity. So that was my first film, Unhealthy Comedian. It's by no means the greatest documentary ever made, but the fact that I was able to make a feature film and have it get picked up by Tubi, Roku, Amazon, that's a big deal. That's something I never thought was possible. So I am proud of it, and I am proud of what I was able to achieve with it. There's that phrase, perfection is the enemy of completion. Is it a perfect film? No, but I made a film, and that's more than most people can say.